I was 41 when I died, and I didn't believe in anything. My name is Marcus Holloway, and on September 3rd, 2021, at 11:23 in the morning, my heart stopped beating for 7 minutes and 19 seconds. 7 minutes doesn't sound like much. 7 minutes is the time it takes to make coffee, to check your emails, to scroll through social media and forget what you were even looking for. 7 minutes is nothing in the grand scheme of a life. But in those 7 minutes, I saw something that shattered every certainty I'd built my life on. Every belief, every argument, every carefully constructed wall of logic and reason that I'd spent decades building. I was an atheist, a proud one. Not the quiet kind who just didn't go to church. The loud kind. The kind who debated believers online. The kind who rolled his eyes at prayer before meals. The kind who quoted Hitchens and Dawkins like scripture. I believed in science, in logic, in what I could see and measure and prove. I believed death was the end. A light switch flipping off. Consciousness dissolving into nothing. No heaven, no hell, no God, no afterlife, just the void. Just eternal, peaceful nothingness. And I was fine with that. Or at least I thought I was. Before we continue, close your eyes and whisper the word light. If you feel something move inside, stay. The light still speaks. Even to those who spent their whole lives denying it existed. What I saw in that void wasn't what I expected. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. And it terrified me more than death ever could. The morning it happened started like every other morning in my carefully controlled life. My alarm went off at 6:30, the same digital beep I'd heard for the past 8 years. I reached over and silenced it without opening my eyes. I knew exactly where the button was. Muscle memory, routine. Everything in my life was routine. I liked it that way, predictable, manageable, no surprises, no chaos, no uncertainty. The room was dark. The blackout curtains I'd installed 3 years ago kept out every trace of light. I'd read a study about how darkness improves sleep quality, how it regulates melatonin production, how it leads to better REM cycles. So I bought the best curtains money could buy. Because I believed in optimization, in making myself the best possible version of myself through data and evidence and intelligent choices. I lay there for a moment, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. It was late summer in Graymont, a mid-sized city in the Midwest where nothing much ever happened. The kind of place people moved to for work and stayed because it was easier than leaving. I'd been here for 15 years, since I graduated from college and got my first job. I worked as a software engineer for a tech firm downtown. I was good at my job. Very good. I'd been promoted 3 times. I made 6 figures. I had respect from my peers. I was known as the guy who could solve any problem. The guy who could debug code that everyone else had given up on. I liked problems that had solutions. Code that either worked or didn't. There was no ambiguity in programming. No faith required. Just logic. Just proof. Just cause and effect. I got up, walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower. The water took exactly 43 seconds to reach the optimal temperature. I'd timed it. I knew because I counted every morning. It was a game I played with myself, a way to stay present, to not let my mind wander too much. I stepped in and let the water run over my head. The heat felt good against my skin. I stood there, eyes closed, letting the water drum against my shoulders. It felt good. Cleansing, but not in any spiritual sense. Just in the literal, physical sense. Dirt and sweat and dead skin cells washing down the drain. Biology, chemistry, physics, nothing more. I washed my hair with the same shampoo I'd used for 5 years. I didn't believe in switching products unnecessarily. If something worked, why change it? I rinsed, turned off the tap, reached for the towel that hung on the same hook every single day. I dried myself methodically. Hair first, then torso, then legs. Same order every time. I looked at myself in the mirror. Brown eyes, short dark hair starting to thin at the temples. A few lines starting to show near my mouth and around my eyes. I was aging. That was fine. It was natural. Inevitable. Cellular degradation. Telomeres shortening with each division. Entropy increasing. I understood the process. Understanding it made it less frightening. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I got dressed in the usual uniform: jeans, dark gray t-shirt, black hoodie. I worked in tech, so no one cared what you wore as long as you delivered results. As long as your code was clean and your projects shipped on time. I liked that about the industry. Meritocracy. Or at least the illusion of it. Your ideas mattered more than your appearance. Your logic mattered more than your charisma. I went to the kitchen. My apartment was small but efficient. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a combined living room and kitchen, minimalist furniture. Nothing on the walls except a single framed poster of the periodic table. I didn't believe in decoration for decoration's sake. Everything should serve a purpose. I made coffee in my expensive espresso machine, the one luxury I allowed myself. I took my coffee seriously, the ritual of it. Grinding the beans fresh every morning, the smell of them as they broke apart, tamping the grounds precisely, 20 pounds of pressure, no more, no less, pulling the shot for exactly 28 seconds. Watching the dark liquid flow into the cup. It was meditative in a way, but not religious. Never religious. Just focused. Present. A small moment of craftsmanship in an otherwise automated world. I sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop open, checking emails before I even left the house. This was my routine. Wake up, shower, dress, coffee, email. The same, every single day. I had 4 new messages, 2 from colleagues about a project we were working on. 1 from a recruiter trying to poach me for another company. 1 from my brother. I opened the first 3, ignored the 4th. My brother David and I didn't talk much anymore. We used to be close. When we were kids. When we were teenagers. We shared a room growing up. We stayed up late talking about everything. Music, movies, girls, the future. We had plans. We were going to travel the world together, start a business, make something of ourselves. But then something changed. He went to college and met this girl, Sarah. She was religious. Really religious. And David fell for her hard. Hard enough that he started going to church with her, started reading the Bible, started using words like blessed and fellowship and grace. At first I thought it was just a phase, just something he was doing to impress her. But it wasn't. He actually started believing it. And the more he believed, the more he tried to save me. That's what he called it. Saving me. As if I needed saving. As if I was lost and he'd found the way. We'd had the argument a dozen times over the years. He'd quote scripture, I'd quote Dawkins. He'd talk about faith, I'd talk about evidence. He'd tell me about his personal relationship with Jesus. I'd explain cognitive bias and wishful thinking and the psychology of belief. He'd say he was praying for me. I'd tell him he was wasting his time. Eventually, we just stopped talking about it. And then we stopped talking altogether. It was easier that way. Less friction. Less disappointment on both sides. He was disappointed I wouldn't believe. I was disappointed he'd stopped thinking critically. So we just drifted apart. I saw him maybe once a year, at Thanksgiving or Christmas. We'd exchange pleasantries, ask about work, avoid anything deeper, and then we'd go back to our separate lives. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, placed it in the drying rack, grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, checked that I had my phone, my wallet, my badge for work. Everything accounted for. I locked the door behind me and headed out. I lived on the 4th floor of an apartment complex on the west side of town. No elevator. I took the stairs, 4 flights down. My legs were strong from the routine. I ran 3 times a week, 5 miles each time. Not because I enjoyed it. I didn't. Running was boring, repetitive. But I did it because I wanted to live a long life. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to minimize my risk of heart disease, diabetes, cancer. I wanted to see what humanity would accomplish. I wanted to see us colonize Mars, cure aging, unlock the secrets of the universe, achieve artificial general intelligence, make contact with alien life. I believed in progress, in the march of science, in the perfectibility of man. I believed we didn't need gods to save us. We just needed time and intelligence and the courage to face reality without comforting lies. I believed we were alone in the universe, but that was okay. Being alone meant we were free. Free to make our own meaning. free to create our own purpose, free to become whatever we wanted to become without some cosmic parent telling us what to do. I got to my car, a gray sedan, nothing fancy, reliable, good gas mileage, low maintenance. I didn't believe in flashy cars or status symbols. They were just tools for getting from point A to point B. I drove to work listening to a podcast about quantum mechanics. I loved learning, always had. I devoured information. I'd read hundreds of books, philosophy, physics, biology, history, cosmology, neuroscience. I could argue circles around most people. I prided myself on that, on being informed, on being rational, on not falling for the comforting lies that so many people clung to. Religion was the opiate of the masses. That's what Marx said, and I agreed. People believed because it made them feel better, because it gave them hope in a hopeless world, because it promised them immortality when the truth was we all just die and rot and return to the elements. I didn't need that comfort. I didn't need false hope. I needed truth, even if that truth was cold, even if that truth was meaningless. At least it was real. At least it was honest. I respected truth above all else, or at least I thought I did. Looking back now, I realize I didn't respect truth. I respected my version of truth, my interpretation of reality, my carefully constructed worldview that conveniently placed me at the center as the enlightened one, the one who saw clearly while everyone else wandered in darkness. I got to the office at 8. The building was modern, glass and steel, anonymous. I swiped my badge at the front entrance, nodded at the security guard, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, the tech department, the place I'd spent most of my waking hours for the past 12 years. I knew every inch of this building, every conference room, every corner, every coffee machine. It was more familiar to me than my own apartment. I walked down the corridor, said good morning to a few people. Janet from HR, Tim from marketing, Kevin from the design team. Not because I was particularly friendly, I wasn't, but because it was expected, because it was social protocol. Because humans are social animals, and even though I understood the evolutionary reasons for cooperation and community, I still participated in the rituals, small talk, pleasantries, the performance of normalcy. I sat at my desk, turned on my computer, put in my headphones. Spotify playlist already queued, instrumental music, no lyrics to distract. I opened my IDE and started coding. This was the part of the day I loved, the flow state, the zone. Hours could pass, and I wouldn't notice. The world outside would disappear. There was only the screen, the logic, the problem and the solution, the satisfaction of making something work, of taking chaos and imposing order, of creating something from nothing through pure thought and logic. At noon, my calendar reminder popped up. Lunch. I'd programmed it into my routine because I'd read that regular meal times improve metabolic function. I got up, stretched, walked to the break room. The same route I walked every day. Past the row of cubicles. Past the water cooler where Dave and Michelle were chatting about some show on Netflix. Past the supply closet that always smelled faintly of toner. Into the break room with its humming refrigerator and flickering fluorescent lights and motivational poster that said "Dream Big." I microwaved the lunch I'd brought from home. Chicken breast, brown rice, steamed broccoli, high protein, complex carbs, fiber, micronutrients. I'd optimized my diet based on nutritional science. I didn't believe in fad diets or superfoods or any of the nonsense that people fell for. Just basic nutritional science. Calories in, calories out. Macronutrient balance. Micronutrient sufficiency. Simple, effective, evidence-based. I sat at one of the small tables and ate while scrolling through my phone. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't want to. I preferred solitude. Always had. People were complicated, unpredictable, emotional. I liked things that made sense, things that followed rules, things that behaved consistently. I scrolled through Reddit, a thread about consciousness and whether it could ever be fully explained by neuroscience. I read through the comments, some people arguing that consciousness was an emergent property of complex information processing. Others arguing there was something more, something irreducible. Qualia, the hard problem of consciousness. I rolled my eyes. The hard problem wasn't hard. It was just poorly defined. Consciousness was what the brain does. Full stop. There was no ghost in the machine, no soul, no immaterial mind separate from the physical brain. It was all neurons firing in patterns, electrochemical signals cascading through networks. That's all we were, meat computers, biological machines. And there was nothing wrong with that. It didn't make life less meaningful. It just made it honest. I commented on a few posts, corrected someone's misunderstanding of emergent properties, got into a brief argument with someone who believed in dualism. I enjoyed these debates. They were stimulating. They forced me to articulate my positions clearly, to defend my worldview. And I was good at it. I usually won. Not because I was smarter necessarily, but because I'd thought about these questions more. I'd read more. I'd considered the arguments from all sides and concluded that materialism was the only position supported by evidence. Another thread caught my eye. Someone asking about free will, whether it existed or whether everything we did was predetermined by the laws of physics. I clicked into it and started reading. This was one of my favorite topics. Free will was an illusion. Obviously. Our brains were just following the laws of physics. Every decision we made was the result of prior causes. Neurons firing based on their chemical and electrical states, which were determined by prior states, all the way back to the Big Bang. We felt like we had free will because we weren't aware of all the processes happening beneath consciousness, but awareness wasn't the same as control. We were passengers in our own bodies, watching decisions happen and then retroactively claiming credit for them. That's what the neuroscience showed. Benjamin Libet's experiments, the readiness potential. The brain makes decisions before we're consciously aware of them. So where's the free will? Where's the agency? It doesn't exist. We're just biological machines responding to inputs according to our programming. And that was fine. It didn't mean we couldn't be moral. It didn't mean we couldn't have values. It just meant we needed to stop pretending we were somehow special, somehow separate from the deterministic universe we lived in. I finished eating, threw away the container, walked back to my desk, sat down, put my headphones back in, opened my code editor, and that's when it happened. At first it was subtle, a strange sensation in my chest. Not pain exactly, more like pressure, like someone had placed their hand on my sternum and was pressing down gently. I paused, took a breath, rolled my shoulders. Probably just tension. I'd been hunched over my keyboard all morning, poor posture. I made a mental note to adjust my chair height, to take more breaks, to stretch more regularly. The pressure didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. Heavier. I stood up from my desk, thinking maybe I needed to walk around, get my blood flowing. But when I stood, the room tilted. Just slightly. Just enough to make me reach out and grab the edge of my desk to steady myself. My hand felt strange, tingly, numb. I looked down at it, flexed my fingers. They moved normally, but they didn't feel right. The pressure in my chest was spreading now, down my left arm, up into my neck, into my jaw. I felt a surge of something I rarely felt. Fear. Real fear. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just tension or poor posture. Something was wrong. I tried to call out, to get someone's attention, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. Marcus? I tried again. Louder this time. Or at least I thought it was louder. But no one turned around. No one looked my way. Everyone was in their own world. Headphones in, screens glowing, typing away. I took a step toward the nearest person, Sarah from accounting, but my legs felt weak, unstable, like they might give out any second. The pressure in my chest turned into pain, real pain, sharp and intense and terrifying. I tried to take a breath but couldn't get enough air. My lungs felt compressed, squeezed. The room was spinning now, faster, the fluorescent lights above me blurring into streaks. I heard someone say my name, distant, echoing. Marcus? Marcus, are you okay? I tried to answer but couldn't. My mouth wouldn't form words. I felt myself falling. Slowly, like in a dream. My knees hit the floor, hard, then my side. The carpet was rough against my cheek. I could smell it. That generic office carpet smell. Cleaning solution and dust and years of foot traffic. Someone was shouting now. "Call 911! He's not breathing! Someone get the AED!" Hands on me. Turning me over. Someone's face above mine. Dr. Patel. One of my co-workers who had a PhD in computer science. Everyone called him doctor as a joke. "Stay with us, Marcus. Stay with us." But I wasn't staying. I couldn't. The pain was unbearable, all-consuming. My entire chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. And then, suddenly, it stopped. Everything stopped. The pain, the noise, the fear. Everything went quiet. So quiet. And I felt light, weightless, like I was made of nothing. I opened my eyes. Or at least I thought I did. But I wasn't in the office anymore. I was floating. Actually floating. Above everything. I looked down and saw them. Dr. Patel, Sarah, Tim, Kevin. A small crowd gathering. They were kneeling around something on the floor. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. It was me, my body, lying there on the gray carpet between the cubicles. Eyes closed, lips starting to turn blue, motionless, dead. I was looking at my own dead body. Someone was doing chest compressions. Dr. Patel, I think, his hands stacked on my sternum, pushing down hard, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Someone else was on the phone. Yes, he collapsed. "We're doing CPR, please hurry." This should have been terrifying, but it wasn't. I felt calm, strangely, impossibly calm. I watched them work on me with a detached curiosity, like I was watching a scene in a movie, like it was happening to someone else. I wanted to tell them I was okay, that I was right here, that they didn't need to worry, but I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except float there and watch. And then I realized something. I didn't want to go back, not because I was suicidal, not because I hated my life, but because for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt free. The weight I'd been carrying, the constant pressure to optimize and improve and be better, it was gone. The anxiety about the future, the regret about the past, the endless mental chatter analyzing everything, all of it was gone. I felt light, unburdened, at peace. And I realized that peace had been missing from my life for a very long time, maybe forever. I turned away from my body and looked up, and that's when I saw it. The light. But it wasn't like light from a bulb or the sun. It was different, softer, warmer. It seemed to fill the air around me like golden dust particles suspended in water. And I knew, without anyone telling me, without any logical reason, that I needed to go toward it, that it was calling me, pulling me, inviting me home. Home. That was a strange word to use. I'd never believed in a home beyond the physical world, but that's what it felt like I was being called home after a long journey away. I moved, not by walking or swimming or flying. I just thought about moving, and I moved. Intention translated directly into action without the intermediary of a physical body. The office faded behind me. The walls became translucent, then transparent, then disappeared entirely. The ceiling dissolved. The floor dropped away. And I was somewhere else. Somewhere vast, somewhere infinite. A space between spaces. Not earth, not heaven, just void. Endless blackness stretching in every direction. No light except the fading glow I was moving away from. No sound. No sensation. Just emptiness. This is it, I thought. This is what I always believed. Death is nothing. The end of consciousness. The cessation of experience. The void. I should have felt vindicated. I was right. There's nothing after death. Just this. Just darkness and silence and the absence of everything. But I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something else. Something I didn't expect. Terror. Pure, primal terror. Because if this was nothing, then why was I still here? Why was I still thinking? Still aware? Still experiencing this nothingness? I tried to move, but there was nothing to move toward. I tried to speak, but there was no sound. I tried to see, but there was only darkness. Infinite, suffocating darkness. And I was alone in it. Completely, utterly alone. I floated in that void for what felt like an eternity. Time had no meaning here. There was no way to measure it, no reference points, no change. Just existence suspended in nothingness. And slowly, gradually, the terror gave way to something worse. Despair. The realization that this might be forever. That this might be what eternity actually felt like. Not torment, not fire and brimstone. Just this. Just endless isolation in the dark. Just consciousness without content. Awareness without anything to be aware of. I tried to remember my life, my name, my job, my apartment. But the memories felt distant, fading, like trying to remember a dream after waking. The details slipping away no matter how hard I tried to hold on to them. Was I Marcus? Was that my name? Had I been a person? Had I had a body? It all seemed so far away, so unreal. Maybe this was all there ever was. Maybe the life I remembered was the illusion, and this was reality. This void, this nothing, this eternal, unchanging darkness. And if that was true, then I would go mad. I was going mad. I could feel it happening, my sense of self fragmenting, breaking apart, dissolving into the darkness like salt in water. And then I realized something. I wasn't alone. There was something else in the void. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, but I could feel it. A presence. Massive. Ancient. Infinite. Watching. I felt exposed, naked, vulnerable. Like every thought I'd ever had, every secret I'd ever kept, every lie I'd ever told was visible, laid bare. I wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to hide. No corner to retreat to. No wall to put between myself and this presence. It knew me, completely, utterly, more than I knew myself. And I felt shame. Deep, crushing, unbearable shame. Not because I'd done terrible things. I hadn't. I'd lived a decent life by most standards. I'd never killed anyone. Never stolen anything significant. Never intentionally hurt anyone. I paid my taxes. I followed the law. I was polite to strangers. I helped colleagues when they needed it. I donated to charity occasionally. I was good, or at least I thought I was. But standing there in the void, exposed to this presence, I realized something. Goodness without humility is just pride in disguise. And I had been so proud, so certain, so convinced that I had it all figured out. That I was smarter than the billions of people who believed in something beyond themselves. That I was enlightened while they were deluded. That I had risen above the need for childish fairy tales while they remained trapped in superstition. I had judged them, looked down on them, felt superior to them. And all the while, I was the fool. The presence moved closer. I still couldn't see it, but I felt it approaching. And with it came something else. Light, not sudden or blinding, but gradual. Like dawn breaking after the longest night in history, soft and warm and impossibly gentle. It didn't hurt my eyes. It didn't overwhelm me. It just filled the void slowly, tenderly, like water filling a basin. And in that light, I saw a figure, a shape, a form, walking toward me, not hurrying, not running, just walking with calm, deliberate, unhurried steps. As the light grew brighter, I could see him more clearly. A man. Or at least he looked like a man. Average height, average build. Wearing simple clothes, nothing fancy, nothing regal. He looked ordinary, human. But his eyes were different. They held something I couldn't name, something infinite, something that made me feel like I was looking at the ocean for the first time. Vast, deep, older than time itself. And I knew who he was. I don't know how I knew. There was no voice from heaven announcing it. No angelic choir. No dramatic revelation. I just knew. The same way you know your own name. The same way you know you're alive. I just knew. Jesus. The word formed in my mind before I could stop it, before I could rationalize it away, before I could explain it as a hallucination or a cultural construct or a dying brain's last desperate attempt to make sense of oblivion. Jesus. It was him. And I wanted to run, wanted to disappear, wanted to cease existing entirely, because I had spent my entire adult life denying him, mocking him, convincing others he didn't exist. And now here he was, walking toward me, looking at me with those infinite eyes, and all I could feel was shame. He stopped a few feet away from me, close enough that I could see his face clearly, but far enough that I didn't feel crowded. He looked at me, really looked at me, not with anger, not with judgment, but with something that hurt worse. Sadness. Deep, profound, ancient sadness. Like he'd been waiting for me my whole life, and I'd never once looked up to see him there. Like he'd been calling my name and I'd been wearing headphones. Like he'd been knocking on the door and I'd pretended no one was home. The silence stretched between us. Heavy. Thick. Finally, I managed to speak. My voice sounded strange. Distant. Thin. Like it was coming from very far away. "Why are you here?" I asked. It was a stupid question. I knew it as soon as I said it, but I didn't know what else to say. How do you talk to someone you don't believe in? How do you address someone you've spent years arguing doesn't exist? He tilted his head slightly. The gesture was so human, so ordinary, so unexpected. "I've always been here," he said. His voice was quiet, gentle, but it carried weight. It filled the void like it filled everything. "You're the one who wasn't." I felt anger rise in me, even there, even then, even face to face with the divine. My first instinct was to argue, to defend myself, to be right. "That's not fair," I said. The words came out sharper than I intended. "You never gave me proof. You never showed yourself. You expected me to believe in something I couldn't see, something I couldn't measure, something I couldn't test. That's not rational. That's not reasonable. That's not how truth works." He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, didn't explain. He just looked at me with those sad, ancient eyes. And then he said something that made my chest tighten. "Do you want to see what you missed?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, wanted to cling to my certainty, to my logic, to my pride, to the identity I'd built over decades of being the rational one, the skeptical one, the one who saw through the illusions everyone else bought into. But another part of me, a part I didn't even know existed, a part I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten it was there, whispered yes. I nodded, unable to speak. He reached out his hand. It was a carpenter's hand. Rough, scarred, real. I took it, and everything changed. Suddenly I was standing in a different place, somewhere familiar. It took me a second to recognize it. My childhood home, the small house on Maple Street where I grew up, the house we moved into when I was 5 and left when I was 18. I knew every inch of that house, every crack in the ceiling, every stain on the carpet, every squeaky floorboard. But I was seeing it differently now. Not through my memories, through something else. Through his eyes, maybe. I saw myself. Young, maybe 7 years old. I was sitting on the floor of the living room in my pajamas. It was early morning. Saturday, I think. Cartoons were playing on the TV, but I wasn't watching them. I was building something with Legos. A spaceship. I remember this. I remember being so focused on getting it just right, making sure every piece fit perfectly. I was always like that. Even as a kid. Precise, careful, methodical. My mother was in the kitchen. I could hear her humming something. A hymn, probably. She used to hum hymns while she cooked. Amazing grace. How great thou art. I'd forgotten that. Forgotten how much she used to sing. I could smell something baking. Cookies, maybe. Or banana bread. The memory was so vivid it hurt. But then I noticed something I'd never seen before. Never could have seen. A light, soft, almost imperceptible, hovering near me, near the child I used to be, surrounding me like a gentle glow. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jesus stood beside me, watching the scene with me. "That's me," he said simply. "I was there, with you, even then." I frowned, shook my head. "I don't remember that. I never saw that." "You weren't looking," he said. His voice was patient, kind, not accusing, just stating fact. "You were focused on your blocks, on your building, on your creation. You didn't see me, but I was there. Every morning, every moment. I never left." The scene shifted. Fluid, seamless, like changing channels but without the jarring transition. Now I was older, 12 maybe. I was at a funeral, my grandmother's. I remembered this day too. It was spring, cold and gray. Everything was gray. The sky, the church, the people in their dark suits and dresses. I saw myself sitting in the front row between my parents, my father on one side, stiff, stoic, uncomfortable with emotion, my mother on the other side, crying softly into a tissue, and me in the middle, dry-eyed, confused, not understanding why everyone was so upset. She was old. She died. That's what happens. It's natural. It's biology. That's what my father had told me that morning when I asked why we had to go. She lived a long life, Marcus. This is just the natural order of things. And I'd accepted that explanation. It made sense. It was logical. Death was part of the cycle. Organisms aged, cells broke down, systems failed, energy dissipated, entropy increased. It was all just physics and chemistry. Nothing to cry about, nothing to be sad about, just reality. But now, watching the scene from outside, I saw something I'd missed. I saw my mother's pain. Really saw it. The depth of it. The way her shoulders shook. The way her hands trembled. The way she kept glancing at the casket like she couldn't believe her mother was really in there. Like some part of her still expected her to sit up and laugh and say it was all a joke. And I saw something else. That same light. That same gentle glow. Surrounding her. Holding her. Closer than anyone could get physically. Like invisible arms wrapped around her while she wept. "I was with her too," Jesus said softly. "In her pain. In her loss. In her grief. I held her when no one else could. When no one else understood. When she felt most alone. I was there. I felt something twist in my chest. Something uncomfortable. Something like regret. You were there," I said slowly. Processing. But I didn't see you. I didn't feel you. I didn't even think about you. "I know," he said. His hand rested on my shoulder. The touch was real. Solid. Warm. Because you'd already decided I wasn't. Not consciously. You were only 12, but the seed was already planted. The idea that grief was just chemicals, that love was just biology, that meaning was just an illusion. Your father planted those seeds every time he explained away mystery with mechanism. Every time he reduced wonder to formula, and they grew. Slowly. Over years, until you couldn't see me anymore. Not because I left, but because you chose to believe I was never there in the first place. The scene shifted again. Now I was in high school. 16. Sitting in church with my mother. Sunday morning. My father had stopped coming years ago, said it was a waste of time. But my mother still went faithfully, and she made me come with her. I hated it. Hated the hymns. Hated the prayers. Hated the sermon. Hated sitting still for an hour listening to someone talk about things that didn't make sense. Things that contradicted everything I was learning in science class. I saw myself in the pew. Arms crossed, face sullen, staring at my phone in my lap while the pastor spoke. I wasn't listening. I was reading articles about evolution, about the age of the universe, about how science had explained everything religion used to explain. Lightning wasn't the anger of gods. It was the discharge of static electricity. Disease wasn't punishment for sin. It was bacteria and viruses. Mental illness wasn't demonic possession. It was chemical imbalances in the brain. The mysteries were being solved one by one. God was shrinking, retreating into the gaps, and those gaps were closing. Soon there wouldn't be any room left for him. That's what I believed. That's what made sense to me. Jesus watched the scene with me. I could feel his sadness radiating like heat. "You were so certain already," he said. "So convinced you had it all figured out. That you were smarter than everyone around you. Smarter than your mother who prayed every night. Smarter than the pastor who devoted his life to seeking me. Smarter than the billions of people throughout history who found me. You didn't see how arrogant that was, how improbable. That you, at 16, had solved the greatest mystery of existence while everyone else was deluded." I wanted to argue, to defend my teenage self, but I couldn't, because he was right. I had been arrogant, unbearably arrogant. I'd mistaken knowledge for wisdom, information for understanding, the ability to explain mechanisms for the comprehension of meaning. I knew how the heart pumped blood, but I didn't understand love. I knew how neurons fired, but I didn't understand consciousness. I knew the chemical formula for water, but I'd never truly appreciated a sunrise over a lake. I'd been so busy analyzing everything that I'd stopped experiencing anything. The scene shifted again. College now. I was 19, sitting in a philosophy class, Introduction to Ethics. The professor was talking about the Euthyphro dilemma. Is something good because God commands it? Or does God command it because it's good? The classic argument against divine command theory. I remembered this lecture. Remembered feeling like I'd found the silver bullet. The argument that proved morality didn't need God. If things are good because God commands them, then morality is arbitrary. God could command murder and it would be good. But if God commands things because they're good, then goodness exists independently of God, which means we don't need God to determine morality. Either way, God was unnecessary. Morality could be explained through evolution, through social contract theory, through utilitarian calculation. We didn't need a cosmic lawgiver. We could figure out right and wrong on our own. I saw myself in that classroom, leaning forward, engaged, taking notes furiously, feeling like I was unlocking secrets, feeling like I was part of something important, the Enlightenment, the age of reason, the triumph of logic over superstition. But Jesus pointed to something else in the scene. "Do you see her?" he asked. I followed his gaze. There was a girl sitting 2 rows behind me. I recognized her. Amanda. We'd studied together a few times. Nice girl. Quiet. We talked about the class occasionally. She was smart, really smart. I remembered that much. "What about her?" I asked. "Watch," he said. The scene played forward. The professor was saying something about how religion had been used to justify atrocities throughout history. The Crusades, the Inquisition, witch trials, holy wars, all done in the name of God. And therefore, he concluded, we should be skeptical of any moral system based on religious authority. I saw myself nodding along, agreeing completely. But Amanda looked uncomfortable. She shifted in her seat, looked down at her notebook, bit her lip, and I realized, watching from outside, that she was a believer, that this lecture was attacking something she held dear, something central to her identity. And I remembered what happened after class. She'd approached me, asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I'd said sure. We went to the campus cafe, talked about the lecture, and I'd spent the whole conversation explaining why she was wrong, why faith was irrational, why belief without evidence was intellectually dishonest, why intelligent people shouldn't need ancient myths to tell them how to live. I'd been kind about it, gentle even. But I'd been relentless, dismantling her arguments one by one, showing her the logical flaws, the contradictions, the wishful thinking. And she'd listened, said she needed to think about it, thanked me for the conversation. And that was the last time we talked. I saw her a few more times on campus, but she never approached me again. I'd assumed she was embarrassed, ashamed that she couldn't defend her beliefs better. I'd felt a little superior about it, a little proud that I'd made her think, maybe even saved her from wasting her life on lies. But now, watching the scene with Jesus, I saw what I'd missed. I saw her walk away from that cafe, Saw her sit in her car in the parking lot. Saw her cry, really cry. Shoulders shaking, hands covering her face. I hadn't just challenged her beliefs. I'd attacked her identity, her hope, her relationship with the God she loved. And I'd done it casually, almost carelessly, like I was correcting a math problem, like her faith was just an intellectual error to be fixed. She prayed that night, Jesus said quietly. She asked me if she was stupid for believing, if she was deluding herself, if everything you said was true. And I held her while she cried. Just like I held your mother at that funeral, just like I held you when you were 7 building Legos. I never left her. But you made her doubt that. You made her feel alone. You made her question whether I was real. And for what? To feel smart? To prove a point? To win an argument? I felt sick, nauseated. Even without a physical body, I felt it. The weight of what I'd done. Not just to Amanda, but to how many others? How many conversations had I had like that? How many people had I argued with? How many believers had I made feel stupid or backward or deluded? I'd thought I was helping them, freeing them from superstition, opening their eyes to reality. But I'd been hurting them, taking something precious and treating it like garbage. The scene shifted again and again, each one showing me moments from my life, moments where I'd chosen pride over compassion, logic over love, being right over being kind. I saw conversations with my brother where I'd rolled my eyes at his faith, where I'd made jokes about prayer, where I'd quoted Hitchens and Dawkins and Harris like they were prophets of truth and he was a fool for not listening. I saw posts I'd made online, comments where I'd mocked believers, where I'd called religion a mental illness, where I'd said people who believed in God were intellectually lazy. And in each scene, I saw Jesus, present, watching, grieving, not for himself, but for the people I was hurting, for the relationships I was damaging, for the barriers I was building between myself and love.